This is our preview show. We'll go game by game. There are 2 teams on a bye, which seems incredibly early. Hayden and I were talking about this beforehand. It feels like we've just barely started the season, but we're almost 5 weeks done, which there are no complaints coming from this direction. But the Detroit Lions and Green Bay Packers, as of right now, are on a bye. We may have more teams on a bye as well, heading into Sunday and Monday, and maybe even Tuesday. But we'll kick off this week's slate. I mean, there's 3 straight games of 50-plus totals here, but we'll start off with the Carolina Panthers, who are 2-2, heading to the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons at home, despite being 0-4, and tell me if I read this correctly, 1.5-point favorites here. Daigle, we know this Falcons offense is still putting up points on scoreboards, but it's been in like a weird way. We've seen Julio Jones go down for back-to-back weeks, it feels like. Calvin Ridley had a goose egg last week. How confident are you in this Atlanta Falcons team to go along with the Panthers to reach this total of 54.5?
Calvin Ridley is the only one you can start with confidence, which seems odd to say considering he just played a season-low snap rate and didn't catch a single ball as he's been handling a bum ankle injury on Monday night. And Matt Ryan has actually been the QB 27 and the QB 23 the past 2 weeks without Julio Jones. So it's a scary situation, certainly. But recall, we're only 1 week removed from Ridley actually seeing a career-high 34% target share without Julio. So even if that snap rate is increased or he's back to full health this week, we'll have to follow along with practice reports. I think Ridley is still a tremendous start as the wide receiver 1 overall, still, despite not catching a ball.
Last week was a little bit of everything for Calvin Ridley, right? I mean, it was the ankle injury, it was Julio freeing up defensive attention, and it was that defensive attention being Jair Alexander. And kind of weird, through the first 4 weeks of the season, the Panthers are amongst the league leaders in terms of like fewest quarterback and wide receiver fantasy points allowed, but it's been against a very soft slate of opposing passers and offenses, so you can't really read too much into it yet. But definitely kind of belying the reputation as one of the most attackable pass defenses. But I mean, Calvin Ridley, despite the touching Will Fuller tribute, I mean, easily back in there in the top 6 or 7 this week.
You know, I don't want to put this Panthers defense on a bit of a pedestal here, Pat, but I think heading into last weekend, we would have expected Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins to, do work and do some damage against the Carolina Panthers defense, and they absolutely didn't. So maybe there is something in the water in Charlotte. Well, there isn't because I'm drinking it right now. But in that, this team is probably better than we thought they were. I mean, in the first couple weeks, their defense was absolutely atrocious, but it's gelling a little bit, Hayden. And we talked about it with Mike Davis as well. When Christian McCaffrey, the identity of your offense for multiple years, went down, they are humming offensively. And Mike Davis is number 1 in elusive rating, number 2 in yards after contact since taking over this backfield.
Yeah, Mike Davis is very talented, and he has a big receiving workload as well. This is also a great matchup. The Falcons obviously can't cover anybody out in space. So I think Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore could be started as like top 24 plays. I think that there is some concern with DJ Moore, who's kind of, his roles change. He's operating downfield more, and he's had fewer just easy grabs. And that's kind of what Robbie Anderson's been doing. And that's why I think both of them are strong wide receiver 2s. And Mike Davis, the volume's there. He looks excellent. And Teddy Bridgewater's just giving his players just enough to work with. He's not going to throw for 350 yards every week by any means, but he's getting his best players the ball.
Both can be wide receiver 1s, to be clear. But I think the industry's behind in ranking DJ Moore ahead of Robbie Anderson still. I think he should be behind him. Pat, go.
No, I was going to ask you guys that question because I made that switch in the rankings this week. And, we know the target share is still good for DJ Moore. We know the air yards we love. But I had already been kind of feeling it. And then I came across Hayden's stat, pointing out about how DJ Moore is being used fundamentally different further down the field. And Robbie Anderson, Mr. Fly route, streak route specialist, is the one getting like the easier, the looks, like the cheap thrills that he's like converting into big fantasy points. And I mean, it's a small sample size. It's flip on a dime probably, but I mean, quarter of the season through, Robbie Anderson has been the better play almost every single week.
Well, Anderson is also getting the deep targets that DJ Moore's getting. Anderson's getting everything. Anderson actually owns 27% of Carolina's red zone targets, whereas DJ Moore only has 1 red zone target. So there's like a reason he's leading in every single category because he's being used safer all over the field.
Gentlemen, there's a show out there called the Rotoworld Football Podcast. And every single Monday morning, in time when you wake up, there's a game-by-game recap. If you rewind after week 1, someone on the show was talking about Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore being the 1A and the 1B at the very least. Now, it might even be stretched a little bit more since then, but we have seen and added Robbie Anderson to the list of players that once you exit Adam Gase, your game evolves a little bit. You are used totally differently because for years and years, Robbie was pigeonholed as just his vertical playmaker. And I don't want to say that that was necessarily a misevaluation because he's very good at that, but then that also limited him from showing that he can do more. He can do more. Now, the question is, Hayden, do we think he's as good in those areas as DJ Moore could be? And I think DJ Moore has shown in his young career that he's one of the best in yards after catch in the NFL, but it doesn't necessarily matter what we think. So far, the usage has pointed to Robbie Anderson getting more of these layups.
It has. And I think the one thing is we can just eliminate Curtis Samuel. He has a 13% target share and it's just not happening. He's just not on the same playing field as Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore. Both of these guys are really talented. I would probably rank them like right next to each other. I still think that DJ Moore can end up being the number one, but for right now, I think short term, Robbie Anderson probably should be like a spot or two ahead.
Quickly, Daigle, take me in the mines of the desert. Why here, the Falcons at 0-4, who, halfway through games, their defense just absolutely collapses. I mean, it was 7-3 against the Packers last week in the middle of the second quarter, then 20-3 at halftime. Why are they favored in this game against the Carolina Panthers team over the last 2 weeks that have shown plenty of positives?
Because it's a bad number. Vegas is just behind. And that's why you should like the Panthers outright. You don't even need the number here. Just bet the money line. Not only have the Falcons allowed the most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks, but look at their defense now. That was already atrocious. Missing safety DeMonte Kazee, who tore his ACL last week. AJ Terrell looks like he'll be back, but it doesn't matter. Cornerback Darnez Denard, hamstring is on IR right now. Keanu O'Neal with a hamstring injury. Ricardo Allen has an elbow injury. And then the rookie safety, Jalen Hawkins, who they started in the interim last week, got a concussion. So it's Bridgewater, it's the receivers we talked about, and it's Mike Davis all day since Reggie Bonifon was quietly put on IR midweek.
Let's move on to the Cincinnati Bengals and the Baltimore Ravens. Ravens 13-point home favorites here, a total of 51. As you know, the Ravens are 3-1. The Bengals 1-2-1. Pat, this might be an oversimplification, but the answer and the question I ask myself each time I see the Bengals on the slate, in order for them to keep it close and potentially win a football game, is will Cincinnati's offensive line, which is their biggest weakness on this team, be a considerable mismatch in this contest? And the answer to this one is a resounding yes. And that I've talked about it, that the Bengals still play with enough tempo, have a quarterback that, has some athleticism, some maneuverability. So I'm not avoiding all of these players, but this is not going to be a close game. And obviously the line indicates that.
It's weird. To me, does anyone else think the line feels a bit aggressive? Like 13 points. I thought the Ravens, I thought maybe took on enough. It was the Chiefs and it was 2 weeks ago, but 13 did strike me as a little aggressive. I'm not going to say the Bengals offensive line is coming together, but I mean, Joe Burrow, like in weeks 1 and 2, was on his back almost every play. That's not happening anymore. They finally sprung Joe Mixon for a big game. And the Ravens, identity crisis is probably too strong, but it seemed like they just aren't quite fully in sync on offense yet, despite 3 or 4 weeks, winning big. I thought that line was a bit aggressive against a Bengals team that is kind of improving every week. The Ravens now, Lamar Jackson is on the injury report. I thought this before I saw Lamar Jackson was the injury report, though, so I'm not going to try to blame it on the injury report. But I just don't know if the Ravens are going to boat race the Bengals the way they have 3 of their first 4 opponents. And more than anything, maybe I'm just trying to will this into existence because I just want answers about the Ravens offense. I want, in a normal game, how this backfield is going to be used and what Marquise Brown's actual floor and ceiling is. We just can't get normal game flow, normal game script from the Ravens. And maybe I'm just trying to wish cast that into existence this week.
But think about what you just said. that I'm not sure if the Ravens are going to boat race teams like they have 3 out of the 4 times this year.
Mm-hmm.
Why not?
I just think the Bengals are improving. I just think maybe the Bengals aren't as bad as we've maybe thought from weeks 1 and 2. Not that we thought they were bad, or as bad as Vegas thinks they are right now, for sure. I think maybe we're a little behind on our Bengals evaluation, basically.
Is there anything to worry about, Hayden, here with Lamar missing 2 straight practices, the first time he's ever done that in his career?
I mean, you have to just check Friday's injury report. I have no idea, but he's just been missing a couple throws. I think that last year he was hitting, and I don't think that that's a long-term issue per se. The one note I have from this game, Marquise Brown's ADOT is way up this year, like 6, average depth of target up yards this year. So I couldn't say that. But I think he's a rebound candidate, especially if Lamar Jackson is healthy. That's the big ticket. We're still not playing any of the running backs just because their snap counts are Dobbins 88, Ingram 80, Gus Edwards 70. You can't have 3 guys splitting work that evenly.
To that point, Brown is top 3, like Michael Gallup, who everyone's angry about, in air yards per attempt. However, he still leads the Ravens with a 26.5% target share. The usage is there, 70% of the team snaps. The blow-up game is coming, 8 targets this past week. It's not really the Ravens being frustrating for themselves. It's more about them being frustrating for fantasy players because they're so good. Like, the only time they didn't deliver was the one game they got blown out by the Chiefs. Other than that, they've been a tremendous team.
What about Joe Mixon? I mean, Joe Mixon ran all over the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's received at least 16 carries in every single game this season. Only 15 total targets, though. But last week was a season high in carries, 25, claimed all 6 targets. I think, though, Pat, we go back to how we started this conversation. That was the lone win on the Bengals' schedule so far this season. And in many instances, winning equals running back production. So I think that it'll be much closer to like the 40, 50-ish yards that Joe Mixon showed in those weeks 1 through 3 than what he showed in week 4 in this contest against the Ravens.
I think you have to give him a little bit of a rankings boost just for finally demonstrating that upside, and still has reached 19 touches every week of the season. But I will say one thing about Joe Mixon, despite the limited receptions, he's amongst the league leaders in routes run. Like, I think maybe it's just something that hasn't caught up yet, where Giovanni Bernard just isn't really a concern. I mean, Joe Mixon is being used more than enough in both phases of the game. The concern is he's a back-end RB1 against the Ravens defense where the matchups are not good at any level of the field.
If you read Rotoworld.com, you go to the homepage and you see that Joe Mixon is the cover boy of one Josh Norris's bust column. So you're asking us. I'm flipping that. I want to hear from you why you think Joe Mixon is a bust this week.
Yeah, I kind of laid it out at the start of the question, but it's fair to ask me that because he's being started in 90+% of Yahoo leagues out there. Mm-hmm. And I do truly believe that so much running back production comes from offensive line talent and from positive game script and winning football games. And the Bengals just are not set up for either. Now, last week in Jacksonville, they were. That was about the closest matchup of talent that the Bengals might face all season. And this one is to the other pole. This one is to the other extreme. So while you can always bank on, and we always like it, the floor of 15 to 20-ish touches, we've just seen him get stunted and stuttered when, they're facing good teams, when they're facing good defensive lines. And we know how good this Ravens team is. So.
And the top 3 receivers for the Bengals now, by the way, is Tyler Boyd, then T. Higgins, then A.J. Green, who have ranked as the wide receiver 50 this week. And I'm not looking back.
Yeah, I bet we see just a bunch of quick passing and negative game script situations in the short to intermediate game from Joe Burrow, which is fine for us in PPR leagues with all those wide receivers that you mentioned. Okay, let's move on to those Jacksonville Jaguars against the Houston Texans, 54.5 total, another big one. 0-4 Texans, 1-3 Jaguars. But the Texans, despite not winning a game so far, are 6-point favorites here. Hayden, is this just a little fire dictator bump that Vegas is giving the Texans?
It's that, and the Jaguars defense is 32nd in passing EPA defense. They cannot rush the passer right now. So I think that is a bounce back spot for Deshaun Watson. Maybe there's a fire lit underneath the team. And I think that is the reason why David Johnson is actually a rebound candidate for me, just because I think he's going to get the high value touches he needs in the rushing game. He probably has a better chance of scoring a touchdown this week than he has all season. And the one thing that's a little bit of a concern with David Johnson is Duke Johnson cut into his routes by a lot. He only ran a route like on 40% of his dropbacks last week, and that was like up in like the 80s, 90s% when Duke Johnson was sidelined. So maybe this could be a week where you get a nice score out of David Johnson, then you end up flipping him. Just because I'm still not sold on the Texans offensive line, the coaching staff, and the receivers outside of Will Fuller.
What are you sold on then? I mean, that's like
Deshaun Watson.
Sorry, just had to say it. Go ahead, Daigle.
The good news for the Texans offense, whether they have a scheme change under Romeo Crennel and Tim Kelly or not, is that the Bengals offense thrived last week against the Jaguars because remember, the Jaguars lost C.J. Henderson, DJ Hayden, who has since gone on IR, and Miles Jack, the other two players who have not practiced yet midweek. The Bengals had a punt, field goal, interception, and touchdown in their first 4 drives in the first half. Those 3 players for the Jaguars leave, and the second half, the Bengals have touchdown, field goal, field goal, field goal. So you have to like the Texans in that spot if the 3 key defensive players for the Jaguars are out.
Pat, where do you have DJ Chark ranked this week? Because we finally got to welcome him back into our lives in week 4. Thought it was a great performance that he showed last week.
So you don't like to assume rational coaching, but when I watched the Jaguars in week 3 get boat raced, to use that phrase again, by the Miami Dolphins, I was like, you would hope that, so DJ Chark didn't play that game, but he had only had the 7 targets in weeks 1 and 2. And when you watched week 3, it was hard not to get the feeling, well, hopefully a takeaway from this game is that when DJ Chark comes back in week 4, they're going to get him more involved because Laviska Shenault has big play potential, but he's a gadget rookie. Keelan Cole is just a guy. Dede Westbrook no longer exists apparently, and they need more consistent upside out of one of these receivers. And they needed to get DJ Chark more involved. They did do that, by far season highs in terms of production and usage. 2 touchdowns. Now a very good matchup. The problem maybe for DJ Chark in fantasy this week, and maybe even Gardner Minshew in fantasy this week, because Minshew is, again, one of everyone's favorite streamers, is how easy the Texans are to run on. But DJ Chark, I've got him back in at the low end wide receiver 2 rank. Someone who really is good enough to be in like the wide receiver 14 to 18 range, but right now kind of belongs in the wide receiver like 20 to 24 range. And I just got to say, I mean, I'm not a gambler, but 6 points feels like a lot for the Houston Texans. A lot.
That's why this is the upset of the week. And it seems like cheating because the Texans should not be laying points to anyone,
no,
let alone the Jaguars. That's crazy. Minshew has thrown for 300 yards and or 3 touchdowns in 3 games this year. And guess what 3 games those are? The 3 games DJ Chark has played, who is clearly a much better isolation player than Chris Conley in that same role whenever Chark is out. So I love the Jaguars to boat race the Texans.
Pat, how do you feel now? More easy, a little uneasy now that you and Daigle are on the same line of thinking?
Hey, most of the time when John's going out there with the real crazy predictions, I'm kind of like secretly like, oh, I was thinking that. I'm kind of glad he's saying it and he's the one putting his name on the line. And I'm glad he mentioned Chris Conley, by the way, when I was going through the Jags receiver core, who had the worst performance by any wide receiver all season in week 3.
Yeah.
All right. We will move on. Then the Las Vegas Raiders, the Kansas City Chiefs, 56.5 total. But the Chiefs are favored by 13 points. They're 4-0. The Vegas is 2-2. Not like too far in history. I mean, Vegas was like supposed to be competitive in these lines. Certainly not anymore. Hayden, when I looked and just from a big picture view, it's like the most predictable offense in the NFL in Las Vegas versus one of the most unpredictable offenses. And we've seen that each and every week with, throwback screens, fullback screens, Mecole Hardman, touch passes, push passes near the goal line last week. And again, with Vegas, it's let's get the ball to Josh Jacobs. Let's get the ball to Darren Waller. And the only way to switch that up is if Henry Ruggs comes back and is healthy.
That's the ticket. Henry Ruggs needs to be in the lineup for this offense to have some more explosion. We saw in the first 2 quarters, Henry Ruggs was getting these like Mecole Hardman style touches behind the line of scrimmage, screens, and then a couple of deep targets as well. So he's the ticket here. Of course, I mean, I think Darren Waller's probably going to see 10 targets this week. And I think that he deserves to be in the top 3 tight end grouping for the rest of the season. But this is just the Chiefs. Like, this is easily the best offense this week, projected for over 35 points. I think that there's a bunch of buy low opportunities here with Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Sammy Watkins. I think Mecole Hardman finally got over Demarcus Robinson in routes last week. So that is the secret ingredient for a Mecole Hardman truther as well.
Only a donkey would bet an under in 2020, and yet I love the under in this game because the Chiefs, with the Bills in mind, an AFC Championship preview and a short turnaround on Thursday, are just going to show up and get the job done because the Raiders can't stop them. That's why we love Clyde Edwards-Helaire in this matchup. I don't expect the Chiefs' playbook to be expanded, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire backfield touch rate has increased progressively every single game, leading up to last week's season-high 95% touch rate. So we should expect a bounce-back performance. And although these guys have high floors, like I don't think they even need Patrick Mahomes here.
They probably need Patrick Mahomes, but
Matt Moore, here it goes.
CH, I gotta say, so it's a great matchup. No team has allowed more fantasy points to running backs than the Raiders, partly because they're in negative game script a lot. But I mean, we need to see more from CH this week. He hasn't had a 20-yard run since week 1. He's been getting about 1 10 or 12-yard run every week, and then kind of a lot of 3 or 4-yard runs. He's been looking like the expected cheat code in the passing game, even though he hasn't like a game-breaking moment yet. Yeah, would like to see more from CH in the running game this week, but it's a gorgeous spot. Despite the 3 weeks of not impressive returns, but against 3 very good defenses, CH, I have him in the top 8 this week. Other people probably have him higher. And yeah, I think it's time for CH to, everyone got so excited after week 1. Now the true thing has kind of slowly crept in again. I think the excitement will return after week 5.
Let's move on. Arizona Cardinals, New York Jets. Jump down the total, 47 in this one. 0-4 Jets, 2-2 Cardinals. Cardinals only 7-point favorites on the road here. And guess what, John Daigle? Guess who's back in our lives? Most likely, it's Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco, who could not practice during this offseason because of, was it a back injury? A neck injury? Neck injury. Yeah, those always heal within, the first 5 weeks of the NFL season as well. I mean, we weren't playing anyone on the Jets anyways. But I look, again, at all these lines to go through my spiel each and every week. And this does not add up to the Jets covering the 7 points at all to me, Daigle, at all.
You mean Joe Flacco playing under Adam Gase isn't the exact chemistry you would like from your NFL team? I mean, this game is a joke. The Joe Flacco's going under center for Pro Football Focus's lowest graded O-line, which permitted the second most pressures all year. It's going to be an absolute disaster. We know what's going to happen. Jamison Crowder is on pace in his last 15 games with Sam Darnold for nearly over 1,000 yards. The issue is that's with Sam Darnold, where he's failed practically with every other quarterback he's played with. Now we have Flacco against this defense. It's a joke. The one player you want is Kenyon Drake.
Hayden, yes. Let's talk about it. Yeah, let's talk about it because Hayden, let's visualize how this game can flow. Okay. I think because of Kyler's struggles the last 2 weeks, and he saved that week 3 performance with, that rushing upside that he showed. I mean, last week against Carolina, he was just halting momentum. Even with open wide receivers, he was just missing them. I bet we see Cliff make it a priority to get Kyler back on track, to start that offensive momentum, and there's no better case to do it than against the Jets. Meanwhile, any play that Sam Darnold has been able to make this year has not been because of good offensive line play or good pass catching ability with his wide receivers. It's because of his mobility and then those moments of being able to throw off platform. There's no way Joe Flacco is going to be able to do any of that. And this Cardinals team has some pass rushers. I mean, Chandler Jones. They have some players with creative blitzes that can get after the quarterback. I don't, again, see no chance in how the Jets covered the 7 points, and it's my lock to go with the Cardinals with the 7 as well.
Yeah, you're not going to hear me disagree with anything you just said. I still think that Jamison Crowder could be started as like a wide receiver 3 in PPR formats just because the volume is so insane, and Joe Flacco is going to be throwing Jamison Crowder the ball. But on the other side, we have to talk about Kenyon Drake. This is somebody that does not look fully healthy to me when I'm watching him. He was not looking explosive down, beating linebackers to the outside. He's just not doing that right now. And he's not running routes. He's not catching passes. That's kind of been left to Chase Edmonds, who's still one of the best insurance backs in fantasy. I do think that this is a chance for Kenyon Drake to get 20 carries just because of game script. But I think we need to start giving him expectations of like RB2 rather than RB1, unfortunately, at least until we see Kyler Murray fully click. He's been missing some passes. Maybe that's a DeAndre Hopkins injury thing. I'm not sure, but I think Kenyon Drake more of an RB2 moving forward than RB1.
The two backs.
Kenyon Drake's low end RB2. I mean, he's had back-to-back smash spots in the Lions and Panthers where he didn't do anything, and he's not contributing big runs. He's not involved at all in the passing game, which last year he was involved in the passing game, but he strangely didn't make big plays in the passing game for the Cardinals, and now they're just phasing him out. And I could see this being the week the timeshare develops for the Cardinals. Maybe that's too dramatic, but he's just shown nothing so far. And don't forget for the Jets, Le'Veon Bell's returning. The only reason – so the 7-point spread, I agree. I mean, I see no chance the team starting Joe Flacco can cover that spread. But I think it's just more about the Cardinals and how unsightly their passing offense has been the past 2 weeks. And maybe it's because of the DeAndre Hopkins injury. But I think the Cardinals will cover, but I think it could be in an uglier fashion than we would like.
Cliff Kingsbury said the highest note on his ledger this week is, quote unquote, getting Kenyon Drake going. And it seems like the perfect spot to do so. Only 5 targets on the year, whereas that's what he averaged in every game with the Cardinals last year. So that's why I am higher on Kenyon Drake, but I respect the low end RB2 ranking. I think that's probably about right.
The Philadelphia Eagles go to the Pittsburgh Steelers, just a small total. I think I get this right, 44.5 in this game. Pittsburgh favored by 7 points. We know they're coming off an unexpected bye week. They are 3-0. We know the Eagles are 1-2-1 after finally winning last week. What should we expect this week, Hayden, from the Steelers offense? Is it back to where it was with Deontay Johnson really being that number 1 wide receiver for them, with Juju still being extremely productive, with Chase Claypool having 1 big catch per game, James Conner? It kind of feels like we haven't seen this play for a month.
It has, and I think the Steelers' offense is still just not what it was in last time we saw Big Ben. They're 26th in neutral pass rate. Big Ben is checking the ball down a lot, which has really helped Deontay Johnson, whose ADOT is low. I do think that Juju Smith-Schuster is a buy low candidate because his ADOT is also low. I think that Juju has looked good on film, but I think you still have to rank Deontay Johnson slightly ahead of Juju. I think both of them deserve to be top 25 plays this week, and for most weeks moving forward. I will note Deontay Johnson has a slightly tougher cornerback matchup against Darius Slay, who's been very good this year. But I think you're going to start James Conner, Deontay Johnson, and Juju. And then Big Ben's kind of been floating on that QB 1-2 border.
If you are falling in line with what we've seen this season and ranking Robbie Anderson over DJ Moore, you are clearly also ranking Deontay Johnson over Juju Smith-Schuster, because that's how they've been used. Through 3 weeks, Deontay had a 31% target share over Juju Smith-Schuster, and they can both be top 14 wide receivers, and you have to like them both in this spot.
Pat, where are you on these Eagles players? Miles Sanders didn't really hit last week. He still has some receiving upside, obviously, but this is a Pittsburgh Steelers defense. While it might not have shown so far what we saw, the type of defense to end 2019, I will also say this is one of the biggest mismatches from a defensive line to offensive line standpoint. I mean, this Philadelphia Eagles offensive line is playing like straight garbage, and it makes sense. They're on like their 4th and 5th choices in some offensive spots. Meanwhile, you have like a guy, Tyson Alualu, in his early 30s, having a renaissance and just being a totally different player to go along with TJ Watt, who might be Defensive Player of the Year so far.
I was getting close to almost declaring Miles Sanders matchup proof despite the offensive line concerns, because those concerns were there in weeks 2 and 3, but then they made sure he got his 20 touches. He looked very explosive getting them. And then last week in a game, where they were never trailing by, I don't remember what their biggest deficit was last week, but the game never got away from them before they sprung the upset. And he just wasn't as involved as he was in weeks 2 and 3. And it didn't make sense because when he was coming in, he wasn't, it's not like he was getting brick walled. He was getting nice gains, but he got subbed out in a few real big moments of that game against the 49ers. And I just don't know, maybe there's something the Eagles coaching staff saw and didn't like, but Miles Sanders, I was not prepared to be feeling confident about because of the hamstring in the summer and the offensive line woes. And then I was almost there for last week. And that gave me enough doubt going into this very tough matchup with the Steelers, where he's in like the RB 15 to 16. He's ahead of like the Todd Gurley's of the world. He's at the back of the line, basically, of like the upside plays. And he's still there. He's still a high-end RB2. But someone that, if you had asked me last Sunday where I would expect if Miles Sanders ranked in week 5, it probably would have been in the top 12.
Hayden, I was shocked that Carson Wentz has been a top 12 scoring quarterback in each of the last 2 weeks. He's also making the bust column this week. And the question is how he's been top 12 in scoring, and it's because of rushing. He had a 65 yards and a touchdown in week 3, 37 yards and a touchdown in week 4. as our friend Rich Rebar noted, a mind-boggling 43% of Carson Wentz's production this season has come from rushing, which is only behind Kyler Murray and Cam Newton. Who's the one that doesn't fit of that trio? It's Carson Wentz. Like, there is no way that type of rushing production is stable week in and week out. These are off-brand, one-luck plays that have happened 2 weeks in a row, and it should not, and if it does, it's wild, but it should not happen 3 weeks in a row.
Yeah, not against the Steelers. I will say that the Eagles are the top 5 in neutral pass rate, and they're getting Deshaun Jackson back. I'm not sure. I'm not counting on Alshon Jeffrey. Right. No, I know. It's not a good situation, but Carson Wentz at least has some athleticism where he can save like his QB2 status. I would not be looking to start him against the Steelers, though. They're projected for 18 points this week.
I don't know if it was because Jason Peters went on IR or because it was the 49ers front seven, but Carson Wentz was under pressure at a season high 47% of his dropbacks last week. And we know the Steelers blitz at the league's highest rate. So that's why I'm concerned about this passing attack.
Well, what is Lane Johnson's status this week? Because
that's true too. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a lot of concerns for the Philadelphia Eagles.
So we didn't talk about this, but we should discuss this Buffalo and Tennessee game, even though we have no idea when it's going to kick off. It seems wild that even Monday is being thrown out right now as a possibility based on 2 more tests. We record this Thursday afternoon based on 2 more positive tests today. But it is the 4-0 Buffalo Bills, the 3-0 Tennessee Titans. There's no lines. There's no totals in this one. But I went back and watched the Buffalo Bills offense again last week, Hayden. And what we see is Josh Allen deep shots to Stephon Diggs that he's winning in contested catches. We see Circus off-platform throws to John Brown. Devin Singletary is probably playing his best football ever. Like, each week, I'm not going to say we wonder because I don't want it to if this offense is going to come back to earth, but it's only been 4 games. But it basically feels like this Brian Daboll-led Buffalo Bills offense is here to stay, Hayden.
Yep, the scheme matches perfectly with the offensive talent. Stephon Diggs and John Brown have been excellent downfield, and that's really helped Josh Allen out. I'm not sure if this game's going to play, just straight up. I would have backup plans. I think that's the big story here, though.
And there are so many injuries to sort through on Nashville's COVID list. I call it Nashville since it's an entire city. So yeah, I don't know what to do with this game. Have Khalif Raymond ready, I guess.
Yeah, because Corey Davis is on the list. I mean, I don't even know if we should.
AJ Brown's injured. Like, yeah, this is.
We have no idea what AJ Brown's status is, regardless of the COVID.
Because there's been no practices.
Let's talk about this. What do you want to do with Derrick Henry in redraft? Are you holding, or are you being forward thinking and trying to unload him to someone who believes the Titans only missed 1 or 2 games?
This is a galaxy brain question here.
It's true though. Like, we have to react.
Yeah, some strategy that I haven't even considered yet, because who knows how many games this Titans team might play. And then I know Schefter threw out today for playoffs that they might go by winning percentage and not games won, which would be in the Titans' favor. Anyways.
Someone messaged me and said they actually got Devontae Adams for Derrick Henry. And so, like, I don't know, would y'all do that deal, or we have to ask?
I would have done that even if Derrick Henry was healthy.
Okay, there you go. Pat?
Well, I say Devontae Adams, is the one that hasn't been healthy this year. They will play in week 6. I think by now they probably got the memo.
Will they?
I'm assuming they're not having any more off-the-books workouts at local Jesuit high schools, which is a very St. Louis activity, by the way. But, I mean, Derrick Henry, this is almost good, man. He's keeping tread on the tires now. He's going to be fresh, for the meat of the fantasy season. He got his bye out of the week early. To me, it almost looks like a buy low.
Okay.
Quickly on this Buffalo team, since we talk about this, since I think they're a real contender, their defense is not playing well. And that is so un-Sean McDermott but what they have shown in the last few weeks, and namely last week, is like a late game penchant to create big plays, which is important. I mean, we saw Josh Norman punch the football out, the peanut punch. We've seen interceptions, sack fumbles, so on and so forth. I trust Sean McDermott enough that he doesn't want this team to be, an offensive identity focus that, again, with no offseason, with some new pieces on it, with linebackers continuing to get healthy, that I bet they fix it towards the end of the year, and they'll be one of the favorites in the AFC, despite the AFC being loaded. All right, we'll move on. Hayden is so out in that game. He just knows it's not being played.
I don't blame him. Yeah.
The Los Angeles Rams and the Washington football team. The Rams are 7-point road favorites here. They're 3-1. We know Washington is 1-3. Hayden, Dwayne Haskins, bench for Kyle Allen, something that we have discussed as a potential and possibility all season long, namely ahead of last week. Doesn't feel like Dwayne Haskins' play was bad enough to indicate this change. Was this an unfair change to a lesser quarterback talent in Kyle Allen?
I mean, the whole situation was it was bound to fail. They don't have offensive line help, and Dwayne Haskins is not mobile enough to mask those concerns. I think that's why you got to be looking at these quarterback prospects. If they can't move, they have to be like truly elite passers. And Dwayne Haskins has some passing appeal, but he's been very inaccurate this year. I think that's probably because he's not used to the scheme. This is his third new offense in like 8 months. He has nobody to throw the ball to outside of Terry McLaurin, who obviously is getting extra coverage. I mean, Dontrell Inman's been acting as like their wide receiver too. So I think it is unfair for Dwayne Haskins, but he hasn't really been playing well either. And I think that because the division is so bad that Ron Rivera is like trying to sneak into the playoffs, which I would be willing to bet against. But right now for fantasy, it's Terry McLaurin. Antonio Gibson's, his usage is increasing, but he's still behind J.D. McKissick in the passing game. That's super frustrating. There's not too many pieces to really consider here.
Kyle Allen, at the very least, offers league average quarterback play. I know he's not good, but is he an upgrade over Dwayne Haskins? Yes. And so remember, he supported DJ Moore for 8.5 targets per game last year. I would imagine we hopefully get that with Terry McLaurin moving forward.
For fantasy, this is an immediate upgrade. For real life, I mean, the way I look at this is, I mean, I think we know that Kyle Allen is not an NFL level starter. We probably know that Dwayne Haskins is not an NFL level starter, but I just don't think we're all the way there yet. Like Hayden said, the biggest red flag always with Dwayne Haskins was his movement skills. It's remained an issue behind a terrible offensive line, but this did feel very, very, very hasty to me. It's just for someone like Kyle Allen. I mean, at least I don't know. I think this was, maybe it is, they're really trying to win this division. But I thought it was too quick of a hook, despite it's not like I've enjoyed Dwayne Haskins' NFL play. But
we've surveyed the league long enough, Pat, where a quarterback goes from the number 1 option to the number 3 and wanting to be active on game days to know that something else has been going on.
Yeah.
Like something else behind the scenes, or else he just act like the backup because that's what he is. But no, even Alex Smith has vaulted him in the depth chart.
Again, you could sense that in Ron Rivera's comments last week too, which were just scorching.
And when we were back at the Combine, Hayden, back in March, he was saying that, Haskins needs to turn around his focus and his preparation. And now we're seeing rumblings and on Twitter that's probably wasn't the case over these last 3 or 4 weeks. Once again, in 2019, the worst 4 weeks of that year was people advocating that Kyle Allen could be the future of the Carolina Panthers. I truly hope he doesn't put together 3 or 4 good performances, and that happens again here with Washington. I don't know if this is an upgrade, Daigle. I think if anything, this is just a sustained caliber of play from the quarterback. You'll get some different things in positives and some different things in negatives, but this was always in the back of our head when we were drafting Terry McLaurin and Antonio Gibson. And it's not a negative because, as exactly what you said, he's the type of quarterback that supported DJ Moore along with Scott Turner, and then the same type of passer that supported checkdowns to, I guess, J.D. McKissick and Antonio Gibson along in Scott Turner's play calling as well. Do we want to say? Go ahead.
Antonio Gibson, as you said, is the bingo here. That's who you're buying low on now. 56% backfield touch rate the past 3 games. They finally got him more touches this week, 17 to J.D. McKissick's 9, and he looked great. He looked so explosive in a tough matchup.
Speaking of backfields, Hayden, scale of 1 to 10 on the frustration scale with the Rams backfield and their usage in the last few weeks.
It's unpredictable. Like, you can't have any confidence either way. I mean, Malcolm Brown, they trust him and he's going to be involved to some degree. He's clearly the worst player out of the 3. I think Darrell Henderson's looked the best in the run game, but they don't trust him in pass protection. They don't trust him in the passing game. So I think that's where Cam Akers can kind of step in if he can. But even as 7 or 8 point favorites, even with a top 10 team total this week, Darrell Henderson, Malcolm Brown, Cam Akers, all of them are like RB3s, and you just don't know how to use them properly right now.
Pat, should we read into anything that the Rams almost lost to the Giants last week? I mean, going back and watching that game, I thought the Giants did a great job of diagnosing what Sean McVay was trying to do offensively And we've also seen this Washington defensive line just overrun offensive lines at points this season. I think the play calling, the design has put less pressure on this Rams offensive line, but they might need to hold up and stay firm against Washington this week.
I mean, the takeaway might be ever-lessening faith in Jared Goff, who, the league figured out what McVay was doing in the second half of last season. He's brilliantly adjusted again earlier this season with, pre-snap motion, lots of like design short area passes. But I mean, Jared Goff's getting treated like Kirk Cousins. He's not allowed to throw more than 25 times a game. And it's getting to the point where it's just ridiculous with the play action and behind the line of scrimmage targets, like where they don't trust him to make any normal throws whatsoever. He's throwing his average depth of target. He's throwing the second shortest of the sticks of anyone in the NFL, tied with Drew Brees. His average depth of target is like laughably small, and just being used basically like a quarterback that they don't trust to do anything outside of structure whatsoever. And they don't even trust him to make play like normal passing plays in structure. Like his hand has to be held on everything. And I think that's kind of what you saw with the Giants last week. This is a player, maybe time is running out again on like this latest iteration of Jared Goff. And I think it's kind of limiting Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp to like low end wide receiver 2 status when they should be more in like that wide receiver 10 to 14 range based on talent. But there's getting the looks are creative, but they're low. They're like low expected points for fantasy because they're so short. And two, on the limited passing volume, they're just spreading the ball around so much too. And unfortunately, I think Kupp and Woods are getting trapped in low-end wide receiver 2 land.
The injury to watch here is Chase Young, because if he comes back, this is a concerning game because it is quietly the 3rd consecutive trip to the East Coast for the Rams.
Yeah, we know that Sean McVay made a ton of changes this offseason. Now we'll figure out if it's going to be true that he can add wrinkles and create things week to week on a daily basis, because on a game per game basis, because I think, like Pat indicated, some of what they showed the magic in those first 3 weeks was figured out in week 4. Maybe he can reset a little bit here in week 5. Moving on to the 4:00 slate, the Miami Dolphins, San Francisco 49ers. 2-2, the 49ers are 1-3. The Miami Dolphins, 49ers at home, 9-point favorites, a 49.5 total. Daigle, time to have a bad team intervention here. The Miami Dolphins, I know, and Pat too, you guys were interested in this team last week against the Seattle Seahawks. Only Devontae Parker hit. Have you realized that the Dolphins are just bad, that their quarterback is bad, and it's not worth investing and playing any of these guys on a weekly basis?
Go ahead, Pat.
I was going to say, I didn't have Fitzpatrick ranked as like an elite streamer last week. I had him like 15 or 16, just because I too have trouble betting on bad play. I had him elevated from where he's normally ranked. I was going to say, I didn't have him, like, it's not like I jammed Ryan Fitzpatrick into the top 12. I just want to go on the record about that.
He was a QB1. So I ranked him as such, and he finished as a QB1. So who was right?
I mean, I will say that there was a mention when we were talking about the Seattle and Dolphins game that I said, I don't want to play anyone here. And you said Preston Williams, Devontae Parker, Mike Gesicki, Ryan Fitzpatrick. And this team is just bad. Like there's a difference between a bad Bengals team and a bad Dolphins team, where I count on Zach Taylor, Joe Burrow, the consistency there with the pass catchers that he has, versus what this Dolphins team brings to the table, which they aren't running enough plays. I mean, they're like 22nd in the NFL in plays per game. When I look at my fantasy rosters, I don't want to have investment in this Dolphins team at all.
So the argument was against the Seahawks defense, which only forced Miami's offense to punt one time. Like, I think we both got there. I know they didn't cover in the end, but it took until the 4th quarter for the Seahawks to finally run away. I think we both got there. Either way, for this game, I'm curious to see if Garoppolo comes back, because the Dolphins have allowed the 4th most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. And Garoppolo has yet to start when he was healthy with George Kittle, because remember, he got injured in the first game in the first half. Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel, who we should expect to see a snap count increase this week. So I think the 49ers are just getting healthy at the right time now to start their run.
My takeaway from the Dolphins last week, by the way, is giving up the wide receiver 3 ghost on Preston Williams.
I agree. We're out.
Extremely talented player, but yeah, I mean, we gotta reset and give this a few weeks, give this some time to breathe.
Yeah.
And then with the COVID madness and the bye week troubles, if you're in a more casual kind of home league, he's not even like a must hold in like 12 team leagues. And the kind of like leagues we play in, you're not gonna really drop Preston Williams, but I think you can maybe get away with dropping Preston Williams in your home league.
Hayden, 9-point favorites at home. If Raheem Mostert does not come back, is that Jerick McKinnon as a top 12 running back this week?
Definitely. His expected fantasy points in games without Raheem Mostert's at 18% or 18 fantasy points. Jeff Wilson's barely even playing. He played 6 snaps last week, and 57% of his touches this year have came in garbage time. This has been the Jerick McKinnon show, who's played a little bit more than I expected as a smaller back coming off of major knee injuries, but he looks pretty healthy. And I think that even after this game, he should be treated as like a top 12, top 15 fantasy back this week. I think even when Raheem Mostert comes back, he'll still be involved to some degree. The one takeaway though is George Kittle and Deebo Samuel coming back. That is kind of troubling for Brandon Ayuk unless Jimmy G becomes like a top 15 fantasy quarterback. That's a lot of mouths to feed and an offense that in theory wants to run the ball at league high rates.
To be clear, though, if someone in your league thinks this is suddenly McKinnon's backfield whenever Mostert returns, you should go out and trade for Mostert, because I would imagine it's 60-40 in favor of Mostert whenever he comes back.
That's going to the potential game of the weekend, I think, which is wild to say about these two teams. The 3-1 Indianapolis Colts, the 1-3, no, also the 3-1 Cleveland Browns. Excuse me, I have it written incorrectly. Just in my head, I thought that might be 1-3. 46 total in this one. 1.5 point favorites. The Colts are on the road. Pat, what do we think about this? Because it's two teams that I would not call offensive juggernauts in the style that, is aesthetically pleasing in 2020. Yet I think both teams understand their identity and are executing it quite well through 4 weeks of the NFL season.
Yeah, I would say this is like a big gut check game for the Colts, who I feel like we just don't quite know who they are yet. It definitely is for the Browns, but the Browns already had one of those in week 3. Like, I didn't have a grip heading into week 4. On like who the Browns really were. Like, this was actually going to work, and it worked to perfection against the Dallas Cowboys. And the Colts, playing league best defense so far, but they lost to the Jaguars in week 1. And then the big victories have been over the Jets, the Vikings, and the Bears. And again, the Browns, especially now without Nick Chubb, it's not like the Browns are like going to be they're not, even despite what happened last week, they're not some juggernaut offense that's going to be out there like exposing defenses yet or whatever. But this is like the biggest test by far for the Colts so far this season. And I'm very interested. I think we're going to find out more about like how good this Colts team really is this week, because a thing that good teams do is they dominate bad teams, and the Colts have been doing that. But I want to see them against a team that's looking to be also on the rise. And before I officially consider the Colts a contending team, because the offense, it's kind of been disappointing, really. Phillip Rivers is getting hidden. Jonathan Taylor, after the explosive week 2 usage, is stuck. It's not a committee, but he's ceding too many change of pace touches, not just snaps, touches to Nyheim Hines and Jordan Wilkins. And a lot of it's in closeout mode or whatever, but why not use the rookie to close out the game? And basically the Colts are a team I've been wanting more information on, and I feel like we're going to get it this week.
This is the Juergens game of the week for anyone over 50, because the run is going to be established on both sides of the ball. 46 attempts in week 1 for the Colts, and they lost. They haven't passed the ball over 30 times since, and they're 3-0. The Browns, on the other hand, score 49 points against the Cowboys, and Baker Mayfield throws for 165 yards in that game. We know the intent of both sides. And in this matchup, I lean Kareem Hunt and the Browns O-line, which ranks number 1 overall in adjusted line yards at Football Outsiders, mowing over the Colts front 7. They rank 5th in rush defense DVOA, but the Colts have faced Jacksonville, Minnesota, the Jets, and Chicago's trenches. They haven't seen a formidable opponent yet. And with Kareem Hunt, who I know got 11 carries, but remember, he wasn't at practice Wednesday and Thursday. I would imagine he was just held back a little bit in a game they ran for 307 yards, practically getting him a 60-40 split in favor of Dearness Johnson. Like, this is a Kareem Hunt game all over it.
Adding on to that, Darius Leonard is potentially missing this game. He's questionable. That would be massive. Darius Leonard is 5th among linebackers in run stop percentage. He has ranked top 10 against the run each of the last 2 years. So, yes, I totally agree with you. It might even be Dearness Johnson, Hayden, who I thought looked good last week, despite coming from, was it the XFL or the AAF, Hayden, Daigle? Because I know you're an expert in both.
He came from the Orlando Apollos of the Elite League, the AAF.
Excuse me. My bad.
Yeah, I think Dearness Johnson, I mean, maybe you can plug him in there with some bye week troubles, but I don't know. I wouldn't be counting on him. I think that Kareem Hunt can make this a one backfield committee and instead of a two back committee. And yeah, I just think that he's going to be locked in like top 6, top 7 fantasy back until Chubb gets back.
Pat, boom. I wanted to ask your ranking because I have him at number 5.
I've got him at number 4. And
you beat me.
Hayden made the crucial point where just don't assume like a 1-for-1 replacement in terms of backfield usage. Where now all of a sudden Dearness Johnson is getting a ton of work as the number 2. It is going to be more of now like a traditional like Dalvin Cook style role for Kevin Stefanski last year for Kareem Hunt. But Dearness Johnson in an offense that wants to run this much, like as John said, a game where they score 49 points and the quarterback passes for 165 yards, there will be carries from the number 2 running back. I think, yeah, if you're in COVID, bye week chaos, you can make a case for optimism for Deontay Johnson in like the RB 36 range. But yeah, Kareem Hunt to me immediately vaulted into the top 5. I had him at number 3. I've settled on him at number 4.
T.Y. Hilton just missed on a few downfield plays last week. Would love to see him and Phillip Rivers actually connect on some of those moving forward. All right, next up, New York Giants, Dallas Cowboys, total of 54. Dallas at home, 9.5-point favorites here. Guess who returns, Hayden? Dallas faces Jason Garrett. This today came out from his press conference. Jason Garrett on the Giants offense. Quote, "You have to rely on the things you're good at, and we're trying to figure out what those are." Thoughts?
There are no good things. They're using Evan Ingram like he's Jason Witten. It's just 4-yard curl after 4-yard curl. It's so frustrating. But I do think this is the week that Evan Ingram becomes a tight end 1 again. And I think that Darius Slayton is a rebound candidate. I know Rotoworld will love that. I'm usually low on Darius Slayton. I think this is the week. He's been the wide receiver 16 in fantasy usage, and he has the perfect matchup to execute on that because the Cowboys haven't been able to cover anybody. And I think Daniel Jones could be a QB2 streamer, even though he's been horrible, like really, really bad. But you got to remember he's athletic, and the Cowboys linebackers look really slow. So I think there's a path to maybe some production for Darius Slayton, Evan Ingram, and Daniel Jones.
Yeah, Daigle, this really is one of those fantasy conundrums, right? Because the Dallas defense is just so bad. Yet Daniel Jones, I think, has looked like a lot of garbage in a lot of these games. Outside of maybe that first throw to Darius Slayton in week 1, it seems like they're just struggle city. They don't know what their identity is, especially without Saquon Barkley. Like confidence level in any of these plays. I know we get desperate, especially with potentially, the Buffalo and Tennessee game not being played, but man, that's just like hold on to your butts type starts with these Giants players, even despite the matchup.
It's a DFS wet dream because you typically just stack bad plays in good spots. And Daniel Jones and the Giants offense are now in a good spot. This defense has allowed 36.5 points per game. They're on pace for 584 points allowed, which is 148 more than they had allowed the previous franchise record. So I don't know if you have complete confidence in them, but if you're desperate because of injury or because of bye weeks, like, sure, why not? I also think on the other side of the ball, perhaps you can use Dallas's defense. Daniel Jones is taking 14 sacks, and we know he's good for a handful of turnovers every single game this year.
So the first order of business for Daniel Jones, score a touchdown for the first time since week 1. It's been over a month. Get a touchdown, baby steps, you're a quarterback, score an NFL touchdown. And you guys kind of both hinted at it. So for DFS, it makes sense. You go contrarian, try to get some money somewhere. Redraft leagues, you have to remember, so like Daniel Jones, like this looks like, finally a spot for Daniel Jones against this really bad Cowboys defense. But you have to remember that it goes both ways. This really bad Cowboys defense is now finally getting a matchup with a quarterback who might not just eviscerate them. So you have to decide like who gets the pillow week this week, who's getting the week off this week. And Daniel Jones has been so bad that I would be more inclined to trust the Cowboys defense than Daniel Jones.
I will still play like bad players in good spots, hence Ryan Fitzpatrick last week. My concern for the Giants this year is that Daniel Jones isn't playing with his hair on fire in Jason Garrett's offense. Like you can't even say Daniel Jones scored 4 games of 30 points last year and compare that to this year because it's an entirely different scheme that isn't allowing him to be explosive whatsoever.
And it's just not a good supporting cast. I mean, we like Evan Ingram. I like Darius Slayton, but this is a bottom 5 or 6 NFL supporting cast right now.
Yeah, the Giants run the 4th fewest plays per game. They simply aren't good enough to play slow right now. Hayden, we haven't said a word about the Cowboys. I think we all know how good this offense can be, how good CeeDee Lamb has been. I think Amari Cooper leads the league in either targets or receptions so far this season. We know Zeke is going to eat. Dak may be on pace for quarterback 1 numbers. Anything else to say about Dalton Schultz or Michael Gallup, so on and so forth?
Well, Michael Gallup, 92% of his targets have been near the sideline. That's basically the highest in the entire NFL. And those sideline targets are low value targets compared to the ones over the middle. Also, most of his targets are downfield, like 25%. That's also near league highs. That makes him a very volatile player. This is an opportunity for Michael Gallup to produce as like a boom wide receiver 3, but the floor is just non-existent because targets are going elsewhere, and they're more bankable targets to CeeDee Lamb, who looks so good. He's going to be a superstar. Going back to real quick, going back with Evan Ingram, when we talk about the tight end position, we want to write off Hayden Hurst. We want to write off Evan Ingram. We want to write off Tyler Higbee. Who are you starting over them? Like, there's no one to pick up. So like, it sucks to say Hayden Hurst is a low end tight end 1. I know it's onion, but Hayden Hurst is a low end tight end 1 by default. It's not a great low end tight end 1, but you have to be starting Evan Ingram because who are you picking up?
Evan Ingram's catchable ball rate is the 2nd lowest, only to Logan Thomas's, which may change with Kyle Allen. I don't know. But Evan Ingram is still seeing tremendous usage. Hayden, correct me if I'm wrong, 90% routes on Daniel Jones dropbacks, right? Like,
he's second in the NFL among tight ends in routes run. That equates to tight end 6 usage, and he's still a good player. He just needs to be used a little bit better.
He's getting targets too. He's not just running routes. He's still even getting targets.
Suck it up and play the guy. I mean, it's that easy. Suck it up and play him.
The complete dumpster fire that the tight end position was one of the 6 most shocking developments on the previous show prior to this one. So go and check that out.
Where Josh gets a little loose in the middle.
Just saying. All right, next up, Denver Broncos, New England Patriots. I did not see a total for this game, but the Patriots are 8-point favorites here at home. They're 2-2. We know the Broncos are 1-3. I think Drew Lock returned to practice on a limited basis, individual drills. So who knows if he's going to play in this game? But we saw what the Patriots did. We know Cam is, I believe, still on the COVID list. They started with Brian Hoyer, and he knew the offense. He also knew how to run the offense into the ground. And then Jarrett Stidham came in and threw interceptions. I mean, all that I saw, Pat, and all I could think of when I was watching this Patriots team was that it took a week and a half, 2 weeks for the national media, for the local media to even give Cam Newton the starting job, despite the play of those two. Like, it just shocks me that it was even entertained that someone else could be the starting quarterback for the New England Patriots this year once Cam Newton signed.
And the Patriots media, a lot of good members in the Patriots media, but they are kind of understandably so very worshipful of Bill Belichick, and they don't really have a lot of cynicism for what Bill Belichick says. So that's probably how that happened. Because if you watch that game, it's just like, so clearly nowhere even near the level of Cam Newton, either one of the, obviously not a difficult decision. Brian Hoyer was 2 completely mind-numbing sacks away from probably not getting benched. Just absolutely atrocious decision making, though, especially from someone who's like 1 positive, is supposed to be a veteran intangibles. And it really makes you wonder how Jarrett Stidham, you can kind of write off the intercept. He got put in like an impossible spot to succeed last week. But clearly the fact that the Patriots were comfortable going with Brian Hoyer over Jarrett Stidham does not speak well to what Jarrett Stidham has been showing in practice. But how stunning is it that what we all saw, that the Patriots were still in this game, like almost the entire game. Bill Belichick is a god.
Understand without Cam Newton that Damian Harris is a touchdown or bust option. 17 carries, 22 snaps, 3 routes run. He is being used exactly like Sony Michel, which is not what you want with the other players getting targets.
But I kind of disagree with that, because he's far more explosive than Sony Michel. Like, what he showed last week and what he showed on Monday Night Football was that he can reel off a 40-plus yard run. So while he might not be getting this massive workload with James White in there and whoever else in there, I think it's premature to say, well, all we can expect is what Sony Michel has done on 1-yard plunge touchdowns, because I think Damian Harris can do more. Plus, if we go back to the Patriots media, all that the storyline was in training camp was how Damian Harris was second in targets on the team next to Julian Edelman. I understand they might not have done that this past week because that game plan was whatever, but it could happen moving forward if they've already showed it prior to this game.
It could happen, but I don't see them taking Burkhead and White off the field for Damian Harris. And remember, Cam Newton comes back. That's 12 carries per game more that he's sucking away from the backfield. So that's why I'm worried about Damian Harris, although I think he's a fine running back if you're just getting by. It's okay.
Damian Harris, we have to remember, was just getting his feet wet last week.
Yeah.
And to get his feet wet game, he played extremely well. So
yes,
I have him ranked the highest of the Patriots running backs, which is kind of, like an oxymoron. There's no such thing as like the highest ranked Patriots running back, really. But I think we could see the role expand for Damian Harris this week.
Who stands out to you, Hayden, in this game? Anyone?
My question is, do we play Julian Edelman, who doesn't look fully healthy? He's just every single time he lays on the ground, he seems like he's laying on the ground for longer than any other wide receiver in the league right now.
He looks like you push a car.
34-year-old, I know what Jules is going through, and yeah, it takes a lot. The back is just never not sore.
If this is in my future, I'm very depressed. But yeah, I think you still start him as like a PPR wide receiver 3. He should be getting the ball. It might not look very pretty though.
He needs to push more SUVs and random parking decks, Hayden. That's what Julian Edelman needs to do.
Hey, I'm on the Peloton life now.
I can see. Looking good.
How's
all right.
SoCal of you? I'm sure you're just looking right out the Pacific Ocean, a huge sweeping vista, like right off camera there. You just have giant windows looking out of the ocean. You should make that your background.
Yeah, and right next to the ocean, there's all these wildfires.
And parking garages.
Yes.
Sunday Night Football, the Minnesota Vikings, the Seattle Seahawks, 57.5 total here. Seattle 7-point favorites at home. They are 4-0. Minnesota, I believe, are 1-3. Daigle, we've seen the explosion of this offense a little bit when Justin Jefferson emerging. Dalvin Cook last week looked unbelievable. Yet this team is running 56 plays per game, 32nd in the league. And while we also love Seattle, they're only running 62 plays per game. So I look at that formula, both in the bottom 10 in plays per game, and wonder, other than just awful defenses, how this game can reach a 57.5 total.
It's because both defenses can't stop the other one. Kirk Cousins only threw 22 pass attempts last week. So we are still leaning on efficiency over volume. But the same stats we cited last week, it remains the same this week. Seattle can't rush the passer. They're still allowing league high in passing yards and receiving yards to opposing wideouts. And that's who Kirk Cousins throws to because he has no other option. It is only Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen. So you have to love all those guys. And for a team that continues leaning on the run and neutral game script, you, of course, keep going back to Dalvin Cook as well.
Yeah, Hayden, this is a very narrow game, it seems like, right? We know who's getting the football on Minnesota. It's Dalvin Cook. It's Justin Jefferson. It's Adam Thielen. On Seattle, we know that's Chris Carson. It's DK Metcalf. It's Tyler Lockett. Get some David Moore mixed in there as well. But other than that, like, are there any other pieces that we should be interested in with this massive, massive total?
No, like you said, it's super defined, all the roles. I think that Chris Carson's probably being the forgotten man. As 7.5 point favorites, I think that he can be more of a low end RB1 than a high end RB2 this week. And yeah, you got to love Justin Jefferson. What a stud. He's going to be a really good player. That's my takeaway after the last 2 weeks. Very bold.
Looking catastrophically wrong on Justin Jefferson, maybe the most wrong of anything I was this summer, including Josh Allen. The reason the Seahawks are only running 60 plays a game is because they score so quickly. And the Vikings, it's because they're having trouble getting the other team off the field. I think we're going to get a volume bonanza this week for both teams. I would take the over in this game. Kirk Cousins, I think it's an ironclad lock. We'll have to attempt 30 passes for the first time this season. And now, this could go off the rails if on that greater volume, Kirk Cousins throws a bunch of interceptions, which kind of tends to happen when Kirk Cousins gets overexposed. But I think you can kind of throw like the weeks 1 through 4 pace stats out the window for this game for both teams. Or maybe not the Seahawks. They'll score, again, easily on like 5 or 6 plays every drive. But I like the over.
Negative Norris, taking the under. Who wants to take the under in 2020? I will.
Especially with these defenses.
I know. When everyone goes in one direction, Daigle, we go in the opposite.
I'm raising my hand because I would like to try to get a stake back, and I will take the over if you would like to bring it to the table.
Done. 57.5?
Virtual shake. Oh, it's that high. Oh, this is a donkey. Yeah, I'll take the over. I'll make it fun for everybody.
Yeah, it's getting in Big 12 territory, but
it's more fun when the pod sweats together, so we'll do it. I'll do it.
All right. I'm happy to
Just a
touchdown and
$120 bill. Who
up on
cares,
you.
right?
0-7. It's going to take it to. All right. We'll close out with Monday Night Football. Los Angeles Chargers, New Orleans Saints, 50.5 total. Saints 7-point favorites at home. They're 2-2. The Chargers, despite some like fun, exciting, entertaining football, are 1-3. Hayden, I guess the biggest question and what I'm intrigued to see the most is how the running back touches and targets shape out in this Chargers backfield without Austin Eckler. You're going to have Justin Jackson. You're going to have Joshua Kelly.
Yeah, Joshua Kelly is the bigger of the two, so I think that his goal line role is there to stay. I think Justin Jackson will mix in, and the one thing we have to keep an eye on is Joshua Kelly and the fumbling. He had 2 fumbles in back-to-back games. One of them kind of wasn't his fault. It was kind of an odd exchange from Justin Herbert, but that is something to keep an eye on. I think that Justin Kelly has looked good enough in the passing game to be the favorite for the passing down role, and the Chargers this year, they're playing 5th highest pace in the league, so that's the big improvement for the offense in general, aside from Justin Herbert being able to push the ball vertically downfield. We'll see if Mike Williams returns, but the moral of the story for the last 3 weeks is Keenan Allen, first in target share in the NFL now. He's had a couple games with like a 40 to 48% target share. So I think that he needs to be locked into top 12 fantasy rankings, at least in the short term, until Anthony Lynn decides to bench Justin Herbert for Tyrod Taylor.
The mistake you can make in this game is getting off the Chargers offense if the Saints get back Marshawn Lattimore and Janoris Jenkins, because this defense was atrocious before then, in weeks 2 and 3 in particular. Derek Carr and Aaron Rodgers, a combined 8.1 yards per attempt, 6 touchdowns, and no turnovers, just driving down the field with ease. It is an amazing spot for Justin Herbert and Keenan Allen. And remember, this offense didn't miss a beat without Austin Eckler. After 3 drives when they lost him, Herbert still averaged 11.2 yards per attempt. So I love all of them this week.
Let's just say Justin Herbert's been so impressive, at least relative to expectations, that it's a shame that the difficulty level keeps getting upped on him. And I mean, I think we will very much notice the absence of Austin Eckler this week. And well, we are really, so Justin Jackson was one of my, I think I had him on like literally every team I drafted this summer. And then I had to cut him from literally every team by like week 2. But you know, a very limited career sample size, but a highly explosive player. And like Hayden said, Joshua Kelly had a chance to kind of like wrap up this competition, but he's reopened it with these fumbles. And Joshua Kelly by far is the fantasy play this week, but I think Justin Jackson should be 100% rostered to at least see what happens.
We aren't sure if Michael Thomas is playing in this game, right? Is he on track?
Yeah, we'll get our first injury report Thursday afternoon. So.
He was close this past week as well. Right. So if he plays, I would definitely play him as a wide receiver 1.
Right. Now, let's say he doesn't play. Not to think of a hypothetical here, but that's what we're here to do. We've seen that Traquan Smith's had some games. We've seen that Emmanuel Sanders has had some performances. Again, 7.5-point favorites, total of 50.5. Intrigued by that pecking order. Is it Traquan Smith and then Emmanuel Sanders? Is that the order we're going in?
That would be it for me, but it is splitting hairs. So hopefully Pat has better analysis.
It's just Alvin Kamara and that's it.
It's also just kind of a classic between Emmanuel Sanders and Traquan Smith, floor versus upside. Whereas Emmanuel had some upside in week 4, but I'd rather bet on a big Traquan Smith, 1 or 2 big Traquan Smith plays than I would 5 kind of empty calorie Emmanuel Sanders receptions.
All right. That is the wrap up. We have done it. Everyone out there, go and check out Hayden's fantasy blueprint column. It's fantastic. Pat's rankings are up on the site as well. Free rankings. Yes. Rotoworld.com. I'll be back with Daigle on Tuesday morning, for the waiver podcast and his waiver column. But before then, we have Sunday Rotoworld Live, noon Eastern, served by Applebee's. It's on Periscope. It's on YouTube. It's on Twitch. We spend 45 minutes. Just have a grand old time hanging out, talking to all of you in the chat. And also, again, Monday morning, the game-by-game recap, that roundup show. So be on the lookout for those. All right, gentlemen, we did it. Let's have a healthy, a fun, a safe week 5. We'll be back here, same time, same place next week. For Pat, for Daigle, for Hayden, I'm Josh Norris. Up the Villa, 7-2. Talk to y'all soon. See ya.